Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this SBC webinar today, Thursday. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Ahmed. I'm a producer at SBC, and today we will be talking about the SBC Awards, specifically the process of submissions, how the awards work, effectively a do's and don'ts. We've been joined quite graciously by some of the that are involved in that process, both within SBC and our judges and people that submit. So before I put it to our esteemed panel and let them get on with the discussions, the awards are currently planned to go ahead as a physical event. We are looking for December, so around the second week of December for these awards to go ahead in London. Details will be released closer to the time, but yes, this is being planned to be a physical event for the end of the year. So, something to look forward to, something to cap off we can say, rather tumultuous 2020. But without further ado, let me put it to our speaker lineup. So if I can ask everyone to introduce themselves, starting, of course, with Dan.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Taus. I'm the head of brand for Marathon Bet. Over the last few years, we have, or me and the team have, reshaped the proposition and delivered the new identities for the brand. And also the team were part of the sponsorship deals that we currently have with Manchester City and Sevilla.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dan. Secondly, Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Hutchison. I'm a director at Square in the Air. We're a PR and marketing agency that's dedicated to the betting and gaming industry, and B2B and B2C. Amongst other things that we do is write a lot of award submissions for clients for the likes of the SBC Awards and other marketing and PR functions within the industry as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Philip?
Afternoon, everyone. It's Phil here from SEM Global. We're a small independent agency specialising predominantly in sponsorship for B2C brands in the gaming sector. We've been working with and alongside SBC for a number of years. We think what the guys do is fantastic and always enjoy being part of the awards in December. So look forward to this afternoon very much.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Andy.
Hi everyone, my name's Andy McCarran. I'm the MD of SBC. It was my idea to start the awards around 7 years ago, just to give something to the betting industry to, really celebrate the good stuff that they do, because they get enough bashing everywhere else. And since that time, it's gone strength to strength. The original awards were 4 awards, and that's ballooned now to 43. But again, it doesn't seem like too many. I know it sounds daunting, but it's we could easily double the number, the kind of requests we have. But no, it's down to me to help get these things running smoothly.
Thank you very much, and appreciate you all joining us as usual. So as Andy mentioned, the awards this year are 43 individual categories. Submissions are open until the 4th of September, I believe. At which point, the judging and the consideration process will begin. So today's discussion, as I mentioned previously, is focused very much on the actual submission process itself. How do you begin a submission? What should you include? What in particular information stands out? But also, kind of, how do you make sure that your submission is the one that we kind of really includes the meat of what we want to see? Kind of, what makes a submission stand out amongst them all? So the first question that I would put to the panel is, prior to even submitting an awards proposal, is just what makes a submission even worth it for the end user? What is it from their perspective that makes the process, a worthwhile endeavor? So if I can ask Dan, if I can put that question to you firstly, What do you think, bringing an operator's perspective into it?
Yeah, I think from an operator perspective, and not just in this role, in previous roles I've been in, it's very unusual for a key KPI of the year to win a number of awards, whether that be a marketing award or an industry award. Therefore, the award narrative or the discussion usually comes from the team that wish to put something forward because of a great piece of work. I think where we currently find ourselves, and we touched on it just before we started this webinar, is everyone is so time poor at the moment that we go from a marketing perspective, we go from campaign to campaign to campaign. And we have very little time to analyse in great detail, if you like, how the previous one performed, because we're so desperate to move on to the next thing to try and drive, whether it be more revenue, more FTDs, more registrations, whatever that metric might be. And I think it becomes a bit like a conveyor belt. And sometimes as a team, you need to sort of take a sit back and look at some of the things and go, actually, we've done a really bloody good job there. Is this worth pushing forward to try and get some further recognition? Because the recognition you get will be internally. But sometimes, and I mean this with the greatest respect, is the employees feel that they're always moving on to the next thing. And therefore, it's a good time to take a step back and recognise actually something over and above, which has been delivered. I think it's an opportunity to recognise hard work. Not just in terms of putting yourself at the face of it, but the team as well. And it's also giving the employees a target. The target shouldn't always be a key KPI. Obviously, the business largely runs on what that key KPI maybe be for that particular campaign. But actually being able to stand out for the crowd, compare yourselves to some of the other operators, in our case, or suppliers, but depending on the category, gives a good opportunity for people to get in front of them and actually give themselves a pat on the back about what they've delivered in that particular year.
Sure. So if I can then ask a quick follow-up question to that, if like you said, we're talking about trying to really highlight the work that is being done for the employees and get them the recognition that's deserved, what is it about the overall process of the awards and the submissions that you think it highlights best the great work that is being done in the industry?
I think it goes back to that lessons learned piece that I previously mentioned in terms of the process. It's not typically one person who writes a submission. I mean, we'll come on to the do's and don'ts of what you do on a submission, and Robin will be far greater expertise in terms of covering that subject. But in terms of getting everyone involved as part of the process to feel like it's a team effort. So don't just go to your copywriter and go, can you write us an awards submission? It needs to have everyone's input into it. And some of the things, and again, we'll come on to it, but you've got to tell a story, and that story's got to have a start, a middle, and the end to it. And therefore, everyone needs to be part of that. Like I said, I've been in businesses before, and there has been a couple of occasions here where they go, well, let's do an award, give it to the copywriter who had nothing to do with the campaign. And all of a sudden, they're dumped with a load of metrics on their table, and they're asked to create a compelling argument as to why we should be there to win that particular award. So we were actually fortunate enough to win Marketing Initiative or Marketing Campaign of the Year, the SBC, a couple of years ago. But we didn't win the previous year. We were highly commended the previous year. So we took a lesson learned from that piece to understand, well, actually, did we just lose out because we weren't good enough? Or actually, could we craft the submission in a slightly different way? And I think getting highly commended in the first year gave us extra room to try and take that forward, and the team got their heads together, and thankfully we won. Sure, definitely. I appreciate that. Thank you. Anything else to add? I mean, Robin, you make a lot of these submissions every year. So, I mean, do you have anything to add to that piece?
Yeah, I mean, we do, and we will be doing again for the SBC Awards this year. Looking forward to it. We're hard at it, actually, as we speak. The team are writing them as we speak. But look, I think in terms of what you put into the awards, the more you do, the more you get out of it. I think the days of, not maybe these things weren't even ever the case, but the days of sort of ripping a page out of the brochure and saying, look, there's our award submission, we've got some great stuff, have gone. I say if they were ever there. But for me, you just have to prove what you're saying. And there are different ways of doing that. But it's not good enough just to say we have done well this year. It's really important to prove to people that you've done well. The thorny issue quite often, from our point of view or from a client point of view, is commercials, because people don't necessarily, particularly if they're privately run companies, don't want to give away too much information on that side of things. But there are ways and means around that. But you fundamentally do need to show proof. You do need to show why you've been innovative, why you've got the best service in that particular area, whatever it might be, and teasing that out, and the old marketing stuff about third-party endorsement and that sort of stuff, getting your clients to tell the judges why you're doing well. And I don't mean that with kind of emails and backhanders and all that sort of stuff. I'm talking about in your actual submission itself. It really helps to do that sort of thing. So you do need to think about it. You do need to involve the team, as Dan was saying, and you've really got to put your heart and soul into it, because if you don't, there's plenty of other people will, and they're going to be the ones that are successful.
Sure.
I mean, just touching on what I was saying before, sorry, about being able to have a metric that you've done well this season, we've won the award. I mean, there's been some firms. I mean, obviously we won't be going to ICE in February this year, but what I found gratifying last year is you're walking around some of the stands and they've got great big graphics of the SBC Awards that they've won. And some other ones that apparently are on the market. And when some of the operators, when William Hill won the best retail operator for, I think it was 2018, they splashed that across all their shops. They had it in the window. They had graphics behind the counters. Again, as the way Dan says, just as a differentiator from everything else that's on the market. It's a way of people saying we've been judged by our peers, and our peers think we're the best.
I think that all of that is perfect, and it really leads on to the next question that I'd like to ask is, what does make a submission stand out? We've discussed what initiates the process and what makes that process worthwhile, but then the actual submission process itself, kind of, like you said, it's about distinguishing yourself from the competition. Phil, you've judged these in the past, so in practice, I would like to ask you, if I could, what makes a submission stand out? Kind of, what is it? What's the burden of proof that needs to be shown or seen from a submission for you to really take it seriously and consider it as a winner?
Yeah, I mean, it's the guys have touched on most of the points that I'd follow up on already in some capacity, and there's an element of likening a submission to a CV, and I think all of us have probably been in a position where we've been in a recruitment phase and you have sort of handed numerous CVs and you want to make sure you give everyone the credence they deserve, and it's the same with an awards ceremony and judging these awards as they are. Now, the categories can be very niche, which means that for me as a judge, when I've done it over the past few years, not to just repeat myself, and Robin made some extremely valid points just now that I'm going to kind of reiterate. It's kind of, for me, it needs to be simplistic in many ways. You need to try to keep it simple and have a succinct answer. The reality is that the judges are not going to be able to trawl through reams and reams of pages for a single submission. It needs to focus on genuine impact that's been made over the course of that year, ideally through some sort of either numerical evidence or, as you said, third-party endorsement from a client. And that's really the key for me, is to illustrate that you've made a positive impact to a client or somebody that you work with in the industry, so that you can evidence to others that they should be using you because you're outstanding at what it is that you focus on. Case studies are always a very good way of doing that. So I don't think it needs to be overcomplicated. I think something that I would say is an error that I come across when I'm going through the submissions is sometimes people have a tendency to recover old ground. We're concentrating on what people have done in a specific sphere for that year. And that doesn't necessarily require a couple of hundred words talking about the background to the business and how it originated, because I think we're in a relatively insular environment in gaming. Whilst it's growing every year, those of us who've been in it for a while do understand the landscape. We know most of the players involved, so we don't need that. We need to focus on why they should be considered for the award in that year, what they've done differently, what they've done to help their clients and their stakeholders, and how they've potentially innovated in that particular niche that we're looking at. And all of that done in a succinct manner becomes extremely difficult to ignore.
Great, perfect. Anyone have anything that they piggyback on that?
Ahmed, I was just going to say that I think the fundamental, we go back to the start of the process, and actually thinking you're going to enter an award, and how do you go about it? I think two really important things, which is not always easy to do about your own company and your own stuff, is to look at stuff honestly and with humility as well, and say to yourself, if you are in an award for innovation, for instance, have you genuinely innovated? I'm not discouraging people for entering. I'm not saying to people don't give it a go, because we've had clients that have won unexpectedly and against bigger and better opposition, or theoretically bigger and better opposition. So I'd really urge people to give the SBC Awards and others a real good go. But have a look at yourselves, have a look at what you've done, and have a 360-degree view of your year, or whatever particular part of the submission that is relevant, and say to yourself, are we going to win it? Have we got a chance? Have we got something genuine to say? And be humble about it, because it's the same with press releases, which land on Andy's desk every day, some of whom are from Square in the Air. There's a lot of stuff out there of people, blowing their own trumpet, saying how good they are. It's the most innovative, it's industry leading, the kind of cliches that you see around these things, and the judges will see them in the submissions as well. But just have a think about it, have a look at it and be humble about it, and make sure what you put in is an honest submission, because I think, again, that comes across rather than, let's be honest, quite a lot of bullshit.
Yeah, I agree.
Talking about those PRs. Sorry, Dan. The first phrase that always gets cut out, it's usually in the first paragraph, is market leading. No, it's not so much from your clients, but market leading is one of those phrases. It's just ubiquitous, no matter who's sending it in. So it's one of those things that gets cut out straight away. It's as you say, it's about having a being realistic, having a look around, but also don't do yourself down. I mean, if you don't think you've done too much innovation in a certain area, have a look around. Is anybody else? You might have actually broken ahead in that category, because nobody's concentrated in that area in particular.
Yeah, I agree. I think just to add to Robin's points, in terms of when we discussed this about doing this webinar, I thought, what are the key things that I'm looking for? So we've already mentioned, tell me a story, have a start, a middle, and the end. Think about the tone of voice that you're using, because tone of voice to me might be more engaging for me than it might be for Phil, or it might be for Robin. So just think that the judges that are involved within this particular thing will all be looking for such different things in terms of the tone. I'd also think about working slightly backwards, which is an odd way to talk about it, but what is the key takeaways that you want the judge to, having read it, he turns it over, what are the top 3 things that he's going to remember from your submission? Again, we'll come on to don'ts, but I've seen submissions before that are just, it's like it's been entered by Carol Vorderman. There's so many metrics in there, I can't work out when I'm coming or going. So what are the key takeaways that you want the judge to take out of it? And what did you set out to do? There will be campaigns that we've all worked on that we set out to do something, and actually there's certain elements that actually exceeded our expectations. Be honest, say this actually performed better than we thought it'd do, and it's helped lead the strategy to take it forward into this particular piece of activity. So be honest about it, and I think I find it far more engaging when I'm reading a submission that the tone of voice and the passion and they set out to do X and they delivered Y. And if that all comes together and I turn over that piece of paper and then I'm all of a sudden put into a test to go, what are the top 3 things that I took out of that submission? If I can list them, then that's going straight towards the top of the pile.
It's spot on, Dan. I completely agree. It's about taking something out that you can immediately note down when you're marking the submission. It's such a good way of looking at it, and it segues back to Robin's point that don't just enter because you think you should enter. Have a reason to enter. Some of the bigger operators or bigger suppliers might just put in because they feel they need to, but why isn't that the case? And between the two, you've totally nailed what the ethos of the submission should be, and hopefully if they can structure it in a way that's sort of fairly methodical, but it creates that story, then I think they're onto a winner.
I was going to say, it's probably worthwhile me sort of explaining a bit of the format of how the judging actually gets done, because every year we have to tweak it because we found out something doesn't work. This year is the first year we've not had an open vote on the operator ones, because we find out certain brands end up stuff in the vote, and it just takes more of our time to delete the ones, the ineligible voters. The operators and the suppliers are all going to be judged for in the same way. And what we do is we invite the people that speak at our events to be judges, because we view them as experts in the field. As far as we're concerned, if we've invited them to speak, they must know what they're talking about. And we have a very good take up on that. But what we don't do is tell people which judge is judging which category, because then you've got integrity issues, not on the judge's side, but people can easily slide in and pester and pester and pester, and it's much better to have it anonymized that way. But what we say is a submission should be only around about 850 words, because any longer than that, a judge isn't going to have. Everybody's busy, so a judge isn't going to have time to read 8 submissions of 1,000 words each. So keeping it succinct. Just because you've got 850 words doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it all. If you've said what you need to say, then stop, basically. And we also allow people to add in other documents just to give a bit more of a flavour. Because sometimes a video says a lot more than you can explain in the submission. But what we do is for each award, we say it's going to have at least 5 judges judging them, ranking the awards out of 10. And then once we've got to the end of that process, we look back once everyone's voted through, and then we calculate. And with the software we use, it easily tells you who's come out on top.
Perfect. Great. And I think that's a very good segue. Actually, that's a very good segue to what I was going to say next, because we've touched a lot on what the process is, what we need to be, what do we need to include, what are we looking for, what makes certain things very good. But what I would say is a key thing to consider, and something that I'd ask you, Andy, following on from what you've just mentioned, is where do you start? Where do you start when it comes to writing a submission? What do you discuss when it's for a certain submission to kind of just go through the process? Where should someone start? Either an operator or a supplier. What should they begin with?
Sure. I mean, it's something that Dan mentioned before. Robin, it's where have you got a chance? Where do you think you deserve an award? Not just because how big you are, or sports book of the year. You've got to take a good look at yourself and think, right, what's our story? What have we got a chance? What have we got a chance to do? I mean, the problem we've had with this, and this is where it opens the door to some of the smaller companies, is some of the big firms, and certainly as consolidation grows, both on operator and supplier side, they find themselves eligible for quite a lot of awards. And as Dan alluded to, sometimes it slides all the way down to the lowest copywriter, and who's got 12 submissions to write, and they just end up being a bit cut and paste, rather than investing the time thinking, right, should we win this one? What's our story here? We're also eligible for this one. We're also eligible for this one. Do we have anything to say there? And if not, then maybe you shouldn't enter it. There's a bit of a tendency to say, right, we're eligible for all these, we've got to put entries in for all of them. Whereas the finite amount of time you've got to write these entries, it might be better just doing 3 instead of 6.
Sure.
So it's like we said earlier. Find out where are you leading? Where are you ahead? Where do you see yourselves ahead of the other firms? And then collect what kind of KPIs you've got. Work out what you want to share, and if there's some details that you don't want to share, like Robin says, there's ways around that. I mean, what I say to people is, look, if you don't want to share your absolute figures, which is absolutely fine, because you don't know who's judging that. Do it in percentages. So rather than give your absolute, this is your revenue sale, you say, well, it's a 75% increase in revenues. And that shows the kind of growth you've had.
Perfect. Great. If anyone has anything to add, we'd love to hear it. But yeah, like you said, that's a great way for us to start. But no, I mean, we've touched on a lot now. We've touched on, you know, the start of the process, the consideration. We've started on, you know, creating that narrative, creating a story, and then the actual submission and getting the story out there for consideration. But obviously, when it comes to an award, only one person can ever win. And you know, there's always a thing, especially when you're submitting on behalf of others. I can imagine it can get rather difficult to kind of manage certain things. So, Robin, if I can come back to you, I touched on it earlier, but you know, Square in the Air and others throughout, you know. Even whether they be, you know, submitting an award proposal for themselves or on behalf of others, you know, it is difficult because there is no guarantee to win. So how do you manage those expectations? Kind of, you know, what is it that you would say internally in order to make sure that the people understand that yes, you may have had a great year, but it does not guarantee it. You know, it ultimately comes down to the judges themselves. We can't guarantee a positive outcome. And, you know, further on from that is, you know, how do you take out any information that could harm you in that regard?
Well, I mean, just that last point first. I mean, I've never really, that I'm aware of, had clients put information in that is going to be harmful to them. I mean, the commercial figures thing that we talked about is sensitive, but in terms of managing expectations, you know, we've won lots and lots of awards for clients, and we've had other clients who haven't won on occasions. Some have won after a time, and you know, they've had to go through the process a few times and, you know, build their brand and build awareness of what they do in the industry. But it's tricky. There is no answer to it apart from, again, that word that I mentioned earlier about award submissions, but honesty. Because, you know, if other people, and we won't necessarily have written them all, obviously, but, you know, we will know some better award submissions than others. We will know that people have got a better chance than others. And I think, again, it comes back to that initial process of what are you going to enter and why are you going to enter it. And if you've answered those questions correctly and you've been honest about them, then you've got a good chance, right? It might not be your time. It might be that other people have done better stuff or more interesting stuff or you know, demonstrably more commercially successful, whatever it might be. But if you have an honest and open dialogue with clients and manage their expectations from the start, you know, the size of them as a company, what they've done this year, the commercial success of that product in comparison to others within their sector, then hopefully, you know, you've got a better chance of being delighted, surprised, but not disappointed on the night, you know, if you don't win. But truth be told, we've had clients who have expected us to win for them, you know, and have been disappointed when we haven't. Andy and I have had plenty of conversations over the years as well about, and I'm going to mention it because people mention it to us, sponsorship. You know, if I sponsor this awards, will I be guaranteed to win it? No, you're not. Absolutely not. If you have a commercial relationship with a company like SBC, you are doing that for a reason. You're doing that to raise your brand awareness on the night at the show, on the banners, on the website, whatever it might be. It is no guarantee that you will win an award. Your submission is what that's all about. And you know, people who go in with those expectations that, well, I've thrown a few quid at this, so I'm going to win it. You know, they're fooling themselves. But that honesty, as I say, both internally and with your client as an agency like Square in the Air, I think is the only way you can do these things.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how you run an awards, people think it's corrupt. It's so frustrating. I mean, people always say, "Oh, if I do this, do I win an award?" Joking, but also half serious, and it's kind of no. I mean, we once we passed it on to the judges, it's in the judges' hands. But there's still always this perception that they've spent a lot of money, they're bound to get this. It's so frustrating being on the end of it and being able to see, look, it's clean, but people are never going to believe it. I mean, we had one aspect. It must have been a couple of years ago now. One of the judges and he came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, it's been a great night, but it's a shame to see all the sponsors picking up the awards." And I just went, "Well, hang on, you were a judge in a category that was won by a firm that wasn't a sponsor, and you've been through the process. There was no pressure on you to choose any of the sponsors. He had a free reign, and a non-sponsor won it, and he still believed it was corrupt. So it's kind of, if he's in the middle of the process, and he doesn't believe it, there's not an awful lot we can do, and we just have to bite our lip. But it causes problems for us because some of our sponsors don't win, and then some of them aren't happy, and then so it costs us money. It costs us money sometimes, but that's the price that we end up having to pay to try and make everything as clean as possible. I mean, Phil, what's been your experience back as a judge?
I've found it all to be quite a nice distraction from the day-to-day grind of our existence, to be honest with you. And I quite enjoy learning about some of the smaller businesses that are involved in the gaming landscape and working categories that aren't necessarily a core part of our operational side as a business in gaming. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can categorically say that the sponsors of the events have never had a more favourable view for me as a judge. It just isn't. This isn't even a thing. So people that have that perspective, there's nothing you can do about it. As you said, Andy, it's always going to follow you, whatever award ceremony you put on. But no, I mean, I've always found it to be almost a perfect experience to have and it does take time because I take it seriously and I make sure that I read every submission properly, because otherwise, from an integrity perspective, I should be telling you I don't have time to judge the awards. So I set aside an afternoon and I make sure that I do it properly, and I find it quite an enjoyable process, to be perfectly honest with you. Enjoyable and educational. And just to reiterate the point we covered earlier, is the submissions that are best to read are the ones that have a genuine story to win, a story to tell, because they believe they deserve to win it. And that's often from a smaller organisation who isn't treating it as just a blanket entry to every category that they could be eligible for.
Sure. Well, I think that's like you said. It's a stigma that follows you no matter where you go, and it's difficult to shake just because of how it is. And no matter how transparent you can make a process, it's still going to follow you wherever you go. Okay, so to finish off this, we've got a few minutes left. So I've got one more question, and then I'll put it to the audience for potential questions. We do have a fair few, so we won't be able to get through to them all, but I will try to touch on a couple. So if there are any questions from the audience that you haven't submitted, please feel free to. So the final one, just to kind of loop off this process and bring it to a close, is what are the most common mistakes? We've touched on it before. We've heard about not being honest or potentially throwing too many submissions out there without potentially focusing on the one or two or three where you think you have a genuine chance of winning. But yeah, any other common mistakes that you see in entries, or like as you said, Andy, market leading being something that people use at the start, just kind of the language and stuff like that just makes certain submissions just not seem as strong. I'll put this to Dan first if I can.
Yeah, okay, so we've spoken about telling the story, we've spoken about backing it up, whether it be commercials or other metrics relating to the submission. Things for me is, and to be fair, this hasn't been a major problem in this category. However, one thing I would say is don't call out your competitors. The submission's about you. It's not about what they've done or what they've tried to achieve, and don't compare yourselves to them. It's about you. Tell me your story. Tell me why you've been a success. Biggest one would be typos. Phil touched on about giving a process to a CV. You wouldn't submit a CV for a role and you'd cover it in typos, etc. Typos comes across as a lackadaisical approach. It hasn't really been checked. You've submitted it because you've been told to submit it. Make sure your grammar and your typos are as tight as possible. And the one big bit of advice I would have is, if you have sent it to a copywriter who hasn't been involved, make sure everyone in the campaign who was involved proofreads it before it comes back out. And that's not to do with typos or anything else, but Robin alluded to some brands blaming them for not winning it. It's your responsibility. It's your award, your category that you're going for. Okay, if you need help in creating that submission, there's no problem with that at all. But make sure that all those salient points have come across, and always ask someone who's not been involved to read it as if they were a judge, because you'll always find someone who will pick something up, whether it be, actually, I put ball meat on the bones regarding this particular element, or I think you've missed this, or I would take that out, that can help shape and make sure that your submission's the best it can be.
Great. Yeah, right on the money. I think that's a salient point there to kind of, hammer home, is that if an award is being submitted by a copywriter, either internally or externally, making sure that the people that are involved in the actual, process itself that they're being nominated for also proofread what's going on, to ensure that the key facets of information that make a certain campaign or product worthwhile of exposure and recognition, that they can highlight that. Okay, appreciate that, Dan. Thank you. Anything to add to that, potentially, Phil or Andy?
Sure. I mean, this happened in one of the earlier awards that we had. Basically, don't assume everybody knows you and what you've done. We had one company, one poor lad. Obviously, it was quite senior actually, but he'd obviously got it in the neck from the CEO for why it did not been shortlisted for a certain award. And then the CEO came and said, "Oh well, why? It's a disgrace. We've not. You're corrupt. Why we've not been shortlisted for this award? We've done this. We did this. We did this. We did this." And I went, "Those are brilliant. Those are really good points. Why didn't you put them in the submission in the first place?" So it's kind of, we're not mind readers. Some of the judges who could potentially be judging your category might not know you. I mean, it's why we try and balance it out with 5 to stop the individual differences of the judges skewing some of the results. I mean, we did experiment once with 3 judges and found out it was still a bit erratic. So to try and get a more true result, we've extended it to 5, and any individual, because we've all got our own biases that we might not know about. And that sort of flattens it out a bit. But don't leave stuff that's important off submission. Include it. Don't assume that everybody knows exactly what you've been doing.
Just on top of that as well, Andy, I think, you talked about letting people know who they are, and I don't want to contradict that because that's really important, but get to the point. What is it you're trying to say? Back in the old journalism college days, if you were writing a story, it was who, why, what, where, when. If you've answered those questions, then you've got your story. It's even more simple, or simpler, I should say, in award submissions. It's what have you done? What has it generated? As in, what's come out of what you've done, and where's the proof? And if you answered those 3 questions, then you effectively got your award submission. But you can spend 250 words of an 850-word submission telling people your background and where the CEO was born and what school he went to, but it's not that relevant, to be honest. So crack on.
Yeah.
You summarised it by saying work backwards, sort of figure out what you want to achieve and work backwards. I think it was Dan who said that earlier. So true. And again, just to reiterate that Robin and Dan are spot on. Get to the point. What is it that you've done? Why should you win it? Give us the evidence that you should. And then you're on, if you can come out of reading the submission with 3 things that you've taken out of it that mean they've got a chance of winning, why they should win all the rest of it, again, it comes back to what we've talked about already. That makes it a good submission for my money. And it's always very satisfying when one of the quotes that I've put onto the judgment is read out on the night as well. I always listen out for it.
No, I mean, it's just something Robin said there about journalism. My background's journalism. I just see these as akin to writing a feature. Sometimes it's hard to start the feature. Start halfway through. I mean, my intro, the opening paragraphs of the feature tended to be the last thing I wrote. I just wrote the body copy first, then work out what's been said, and then make sure those pertinent points are in the first paragraph.
Perfect. Yeah, great, guys. Yeah, I mean, like you said, all salient points and something for people watching to take under advisement. We are on crunch time now, so I'm going to try and get just at least one question in here. So we've got one from Andrea RTS, and I think he's alluding to something that you mentioned at the very start, Phil, which was case studies. Like you said, case studies is a key way to really making sure that we get things out there, and make a submission key stand out. But he's asking, does it make sense to involve a client or a customer and cooperate on the submission? Would you recommend that this would be a good means of moving forward?
100%. If they're happy to do it, and if they've had a positive experience, there's no reason why they shouldn't. Then that would make it an extremely compelling submission. If you're effectively telling us that you've done something exceptional in a particular sphere of the gaming industry, and then you get your client or your fellow stakeholder to tell us why it was so spectacularly successful, then you have to be taken into strong consideration. If that's something you can get on board, it would be a huge boost to the possibility of winning. That's my take on it as a judge, but I'm sure the others would probably agree.
Yeah, I agree with what Phil's saying. I would just be mindful of make sure that any endorsement, whether it be from a client or a supplier, etc., isn't just a repeat of what you've already said in the document. I mean, Robin's alluded to just gets the point. Don't have the quote or the submission dragged out by someone senior, which might be great, as Phil said, but it's just repeating the same information. You've already told us.
Yeah,
great.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
It just needs to back up the point that's already been made and stretch it out more than it needs to be. Spot on, Dan.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, I appreciate your time. We are, we're a couple of minutes over, but we won't be just cut off. So I do want to say, like I said, just to reiterate, the awards will be touch wood in December, a physical event. Details to be released soon, so do look out for it. The submission deadline is currently still September the 4th. So time is.
We're gonna see if people need more time given all the craziness that's happening. At the moment, it's the 4th of September. If you are struggling to meet that, just let us know. I mean, we are human. We can leave the space. If stuff's not coming through and people have been on holiday, people have managed to go on holiday still. This is more of a guideline to be able to give people something to aim at, because otherwise it's one of those things that can keep being put off, keep being put off. So It's it's not a cut your throat deadline.
All right. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that tuned in. Appreciate you all, giving your time, and hopefully it was informative and you took something away from it. Best of luck if you are going to submit an award. We hope that you win. I do want to say thank you to everyone that's joined us: Phil, Dan, Robin, Andy. Yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Great stuff. So from me, and I'm sure the panelists, thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your day, whether it's just starting or it's just ending. And we hope to see you very soon.